Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Econosite, and in this video, let's look at the recent performance of India's manufacturing sector and some pitfalls surrounding the private sector. Global trade flows have been going through a reconfiguration process for about half a decade now. This shift has been triggered by factors such as trade disputes, the pandemic, geopolitical tensions, and supply chain disruptions. As a result, global companies have had to reconsider their manufacturing and sourcing strategies, with India emerging as a favored destination. A recent report from BCG hails India's manufacturing success in the global arena over the past 5 years. According to its calculations, the average cost of Indian-made goods imported into the United States, factoring in factory wages, productivity, logistics, tariffs, and energy, is 15% lower when compared with the goods manufactured in the United States itself. In contrast, Chinese-made goods offer only a 4% cost advantage over US-made products. In fact, Chinese goods end up being 21% more expensive when you consider US tariffs related to the trade war. Driven by both cost-related math and West's geopolitical preference in favor of India, exports from India are on the way up. Semiconductor and material shipments from India to the US more than doubled over the past 5 years, though starting from a modest base. Meanwhile, China's exports in these categories decreased by a third. Indian exports of auto components to the US and mechanical machinery exports to the US both grew by over 50%. In aggregate terms, Indian exports to the US surged by $23 billion, marking a 44% increase from 2018 to 2022, whereas China experienced a 10% drop in its exports to the US. China's problems don't just end here. China is experiencing a similar drop in its trade with the EU also. The grim economic news coming out of China in the last 3 odd years happened to coincide with this decoupling or de-risking with the West. Granted, some of China's wounds are self-inflicted through policies like the one-child policy, zero COVID, its heavy-handed crackdown on the tech sector, etc. But that doesn't explain China's debt problem or its property sector troubles. China's big-name property developers such as Country Garden and Evergrande Group have either defaulted or are flirting with default. And it looks like property sector is not going to get much relief anytime soon, because as of end of August 2023, the combined floor area of unsold homes in China stood at 7 billion square feet. That would be equal to 7.2 million homes. This does not even count the numerous residential projects that have already been sold but not yet completed due to cash flow issues, or the multiple homes purchased by speculators in the last market upturn that remain vacant. Some experts posit that the number of vacant homes in China well exceeds what the entire Chinese population could occupy. Looking at such daunting numbers, it is hard to imagine a way back to the days of robust growth for the Chinese economy, especially since the property sector accounts for almost a third of China's GDP. That means China now is solely an export-led economy. But is it overly dependent on the West? There seems to be a strong correlation between the health of the China's trade relations with the West and the country's economic performance recently. In that context, as far as India is concerned, having an economy that is primarily driven by domestic demand provides some cushion against the poor performance of the export sector. That being said, for India to achieve her ambition of becoming a developed nation by 2047, exports must perform. As we discussed, India now commands a 15% cost advantage over US-made goods. This cost advantage is expected to only widen in the future. As India's dedicated freight corridors take shape and the country weaves a web of high-quality roads, the logistics cost will go down further. As India aggressively rolls out renewable power, the energy cost will go down. All this will attract more manufacturing to India, triggering a virtuous cycle where more manufacturing brings with it economies of scale, improving productivity and driving down the unit cost, which further attracts even more manufacturing to the country. A similar optimism is observed in the startup funding arena. India ranks 4th in the world in the number of scale-ups. Scale-ups are startups that have raised more than $50 million of disclosed venture capital or VC investment. India takes the 3rd spot, however, ahead of the UK in total VC investment that has gone into these scale-ups. India boasts of 429 scale-ups with VC investment of $127 billion and almost $500 billion in total value of these tech investments. What India needs to worry about, however, is the uneven nature of the growth. The nation of 1.4 billion people has indeed emerged from the pandemic with a K-shaped recovery, where rich people's incomes and spending has risen, while those with fewer resources have struggled. This phenomenon is seen in the private sector also. In the business year 2022, just 20 companies took 80% of the profits generated by the entire Indian economy, double the profit percentage just 10 years earlier. By contrast, a recent survey of more than 100,000 small business owners revealed that about 75% of them were not profitable. Another study found the market share of small businesses, that is, the businesses with annual turnover or revenue below $60 million, dropped to the lowest level ever. Finally, according to Indian government data, the share of exports by small businesses has fallen by a significant 5.8 percentage points in just the last 3 years. In summary, driven by improvements in India's infrastructure such as roads, freight rail lines and power, India now appears to be able to compete globally in the manufacturing sector. Geopolitics for now is also in India's favor, which provides further tailwind to this sector. But India's small businesses are suffering, and policymakers need to come up with a way to address this lopsided progress. I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.